Hello. This lesson is entitled Strategic Planning, and we have the right teacher for you. He's a longtime friend, Dan Ryland, who I've had the privilege of working with since 1981. Tremendous guy. Loves God, but is a terrific planner. For several years, when I was the pastor at Skyline Wesleyan Church, he was my executive pastor. Trust me, this guy plans ahead. Now, God is always in control, but He expects you and me to come alongside of Him and think our day through. He expects us to be wise stewards of us. And the very fact that we manage our life and manage our finances and manage our time says that we are planners. Back in the early 70s, when I was in my second church, I realized that I was in a church that, for my age, was larger than I should have. And that if I was going to be effective, I was going to have to think well, and I was going to have to plan very effectively. And so I took the word plan ahead, and I did just a little kind of a deal that allowed me to remember how to be a good planner. I want to share it with you quickly. The letter P stands for predetermine your activities. I basically said, okay, what am I going to try to accomplish? And as I did that, I went to the letter L, which means lay out your goals. After you kind of know what the big picture is, you begin to lay out your goals. And as soon as I did that, the letter A stands for adjust your priorities. Because every time I would lay out my goals underneath the big plan, I realized that some of my priorities were out of whack. The letter N, notify key personnel. Bring the people that are on your team around you and begin to share with them your thinking and what you're going to try to do in planning ahead. And the letter A, allow time for acceptance. Because anytime you put a new strategic plan in front of someone, you've got to give them time to adjust mentally and emotionally to it. The letter H, head into action. Get going. You realize that as a leader, only when you have action do you really show that you know how to lead. And then the letter E, expect problems. Because the moment that you head into action, you're going to have some friction. You always will. But after you expect problems and have headed into action, remember this, the letter A, always point to your successes. Understand that you'll have your critics that will point to your failures. And finally, the letter D, daily review your progress. That little guide that I just gave you, Plan Ahead, I've used for 30 years. It just helps me. It helps me to be strategic. It helps me to think ahead. It helps me to plan ahead. Now you're going to take a lesson from my friend Dan Ryland, who is Mr. Plan Ahead. You're going to learn a lot from him. Dan has a tremendous heart for people, has a great heart for God. And you put that heart for people and God alongside that mind that really does understand strategic planning, and you have a wonderful teacher. You're going to enjoy Dan. I know I do.
We all make strategic plans when we really want something to happen. I remember nearly 25 years ago when I was dating my wife, Patty. We were dating for a couple of years, and if you met her, you'd know that I was marrying or potentially marrying way, way over my head. And I would need quite a plan. I would need quite a strategy of some kind if I was going to be able to be graced to marry this gorgeous, gorgeous young woman who was beautiful on the outside and on the inside. So I knew that I had a great plan, some kind of a great strategy, great questions. I thought about the ring. You know, what would be just the right ring that would capture her heart? And how would I pay for this ring? And what was the perfect place to ask the question? And what was the timing that would be just right? And what would I say? All those kind of questions that a young man will ask. Those questions really build the basis of a strategy. The answers form the strategy. A plan to accomplish a desired result. The better the answers, the better the strategy. Anything you really want to happen, you're going to make a plan for. Whether you're a teenager who's wanting to buy your first car, or whether you're an entrepreneur who wants to start a business, or a pastor who wants to launch a church. Anything that's going to be accomplished, any desired result, is going to require asking those critical questions. It's going to require delivering those answers, and those answers form the strategy. The better the questions, the better the answers, the better the plan, the better the execution, the better the results at the end of the day. Of course, there's always a price tag to pay when you don't think through your plan clearly. I didn't think about how Patty's dad might respond to my question. He wasn't really thrilled with his daughter potentially marrying a preacher. But it all worked out well. As I mentioned, it's been some 25 years now, and the plan worked great. King Solomon, the wisest man of all time, asked God for help in planning. We all have to seek God's help and seek God's wisdom. In 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, we read, "Now, Lord God, let your promise to my father David be confirmed, for you have made me king over a people who are as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me wisdom and knowledge, that I may lead this people, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" He's asking for wisdom. What's so important to learn from this scripture here is to always ask for God's wisdom before you make your plan, before you make the strategy. Don't make plans and then ask God to bless them. One of the things I love about the Equip team and the material that they provided is that they provide biblical examples and biblical models and biblical illustrations for you to really study and enhance this Bible study and this small group work that you're doing. Even in this lesson here, they've got examples of God himself and Noah, Nehemiah, David, even Jesus, who clearly made plans strategically to accomplish what they set out to do. So I would encourage you to take a look at these characters and allow them to become great conversation and discussion points for your small group. Well, before you in your notes, you've got 12 points for effective strategic planning. In our time together, I'm going to cover just a few of those 12 points with a little bit more depth and others a little more rapidly. But they're all important, so in your conversations and discussions, make sure you work through all 12 steps. So here we go. The first one is plan to plan. I was having a conversation with a pastor one day, and I asked him what he wanted to accomplish. And he said, grow my church. And I said, so what's your plan? And he said, I don't have one. I'm too busy. And I said, so, okay, let's just slow down here for a minute. And I asked him, so what do you do? He said, well, I preach, and I visit, and I go to meetings. And I asked him then, I said, is it working? And he had this long pause and this kind of interesting look on his face, and he said, no. I said, then, so what do you think about developing a good plan? And he said, sounds like a good idea to me. And here's the point I want to make here is the more time you spend in planning, the less time that you need for execution. The more time that you'll put your head and your heart and begin to really think about what you're going to do before you do it, the better the results are going to be in the long haul. There's an old saying that says, measure twice, cut once. There's some wisdom there for us to all take hold of. Work on your ministry. Work on what you do, not just in it. And to do that, you've got to take some time away. You want to ask the questions about, where do you want to go and how do you want to get there? And you need to take some breaks from your work, take breaks from your ministry, take breaks from actually doing what you do to work on what you do. Take some time out, some time away. I'm going to suggest to you something like this. You can make your own plan, but I'm going to suggest to you something like this where you take an annual retreat, an overnight getaway, and then quarterly get away for a day, and every week take at least 4 hours, a 4-hour block of time where you sit down and you think you're not doing the busyness of the day, but you're actually working on and thinking about and projecting, where do I want to go? What are the obstacles? How am I going to get there? Who do I need to talk to? What are the kind of resources I need? And begin just think through where you're going to go. And then literally every day spend a minimum of 1 hour thinking and planning. That will help you in this idea of planning to plan. Here's the second. Determine your primary purpose. I remember back when my kids were 5 and 6 years old, and they played soccer, and it's so much fun watching little kids like that play soccer. They just kind of run around, kind of a beehive ball kind of thing, and sort of kick the ball maybe if they can, staring off at butterflies, and And I remember my son, one day, John Peter was playing, he was on the Green Dragons, and one day they were playing the Blues Brothers. And so watching these 5- and 6-year-old boys play soccer was so much fun, and their coach, I'll never forget what their coach did. Because these kids are running around, they're all going in their own direction, and he would every so often, every few minutes, literally, he would say, "Point to the goal, boys, point to the goal." And these little guys some would point this way, and some would point that way, and some would kind of like, I don't know which way to go is. And then he would stop. A great coach, a great leader, someone who knows where to go. He would stop them. He would literally put his foot out on the playing field, which he wasn't supposed to do, and he would say, "This way, boys, this way." And all the little boys, they would start kind of, scurrying this way and trying to kick the ball and trying to find the ball. And I don't think the church is all that different. I find many times, as much as I love the church, we're notorious for running around on all these different directions. You've got the great youth pastor, he's off going in this direction, and then we've got the minister of music, he's going off over in this direction. And then you've got the finance committee, and they don't want to pay for any of it, and everybody is kind of going off in their own ways and doing their own thing. And when I had the privilege to travel with Enjoy for many years, I used to love one particular exercise. And that was gathering up the leaders of a church and sitting them down. And I'd hand out 3x5 cards. And I wouldn't let them talk to each other, and I wouldn't let them use churchy language. I asked them, just write down the main thing of your church. What's the real purpose? What's the main thing as evidenced by action? And in every single church I went to, everybody who filled out something on a card wrote something different. And so what I want to ask you today is, what is your primary purpose? What is the direction you're headed together as a team? I jotted down a number of items that could be what you might be thinking about. Is your primary purpose to reach lost people? Is it to develop compassionate ministries to hurting people? Is it to reach people who used to go to church, or to operate a Christian school or global missions, or grow your Sunday school, or make a political impact in your community? There are many, many possible answers. The important thing here is that your team chooses the one thing that you feel you're called to go after. The truth is, you can't accomplish everything. If you try to, you'll end up accomplishing nothing. If you chase 2 rabbits, you won't catch either one. Answer the question, what is the main thing that you're going after? Let's look at a third point. Assess the situation. Max Dupree says that a leader's first responsibility is to define reality. He's right. So what's the real truth of your current situation? You don't have to ask complex questions, but you want to give truthful answers. Simple questions like, what's working? What isn't working? How can we improve things? And giving honest answers to that begins to set up for you the premise of those answers that form the strategy that you need. At Crossroads Community Church, where I serve in a suburb of Atlanta, we are clearly out of room. And that's a good thing. That's a good problem. But we are out of room, and there's nowhere to park, there's nowhere to sit. We've gone from 1 service to 2 services, from 2 services to 3 services. We went recently to an overflow room. We started just last couple of weeks ago a video venue a couple of miles away in our youth facility. We're getting ready to start a multi-campus work and build a brand new campus, but we are out of room, and we are facing that reality. We are assessing the situation of no more room, and what are we going to do? So any good and wise leader will assess the situation accurately and then think about that in terms of where you want to go ultimately and begin to produce the plan. Well, number 4, you want to prioritize the needs. There'll always be more to do. There'll always be more to do than you have time to do. And so you want to assess that and prioritize it and stay fresh, keep on track, ask the right questions is number 5. There's a great list for you in your notes, and I really encourage you to take a look at all those questions. But one of them jumps out to me, and that is this question: do we have the right people at the top to accomplish our goals? Well, this requires courage to tell the truth and to make any changes that you really need to make. The truth is, progress requires change. And if you change something, let me tell you, if you change something and nobody gets upset, you've just changed something that doesn't matter. So be willing and ready to ask the right questions, ask the tough questions, make the changes you need to make to see the progress you want to see, to achieve that strategy to the desired result at the end that you want to really experience. So there are several more here. Set specific goals. You see them in your notes. Number 7, communicate and clarify. Number 8, identify any obstacles. Some of those obstacles will identify themselves. But it's better if you can anticipate the things that are coming your way. Number 9 is have an open system of planning. What this one's really talking about, this is an interesting one. Sometimes we can get very caught in our own environment, in our own church, in our own company, and we're not aware of the outside influences and the outside factors. I think about in 2005, January, when the tsunami hit, and how that radically changed the plans in our church, and how our church rose up and contributed significant amounts of money. And we've sent, since then, 4 trips to Sri Lanka, 4 teams, 4 crews to Sri Lanka. And that outside, the reality of the world outside of our church impacted our plans and strategies and what we believe God would have us to do. So even though you set a plan and set a strategy, be aware of what God is saying and what's happening in the world around you. Well, number 10 is manage and direct your resources. 11, monitor and correct. And the last one is study the results. The scoreboard's important. The scoreboard's fun. Don't shy away from the scoreboard. Don't draw back. Attack it. Go after it, just like a pro athlete would want to go after and look at that scoreboard. The same in your church. You want to be able to measure your progress. See where you're going. See how well you're doing. Check your progress on the way. At Crossroads, where I serve, we have 3 very distinct, clear, simple to understand measurements that we monitor all the time. And so I would encourage you to do something similar. For us, we measure baptisms. How many people come to Christ? And second, we measure lay involvement or volunteer ministry, people serving with their gifts that God's given them. And third, how many people are involved in life-transforming community in a small group. These are the 3 things, the 3 measurements, the 3 things that we look at all the time that help us know how we are doing on our strategy to achieve the desired results, to achieve that primary purpose that God has put before us. For us, it's not just a big church. We want to know that people's lives are being changed. And so we've got to measure that along the way. So don't shy away from the scoreboard. Victory parties are great. Celebrate your progress and your success along the way. We've all recently watched the Super Bowl, at least here right now, and the 2006 Super Bowl champions, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they certainly know the fun and the joy of a victory party. So I'm here to tell you in that same light, a good strategy will get you to the party.